Hi, I'm Natalia Bonner. Welcome to Let's Stitch a Year of Stars Piecing Edition. This is block number 7, the Spider Star. We are definitely going to be quilting, or piecing, I should say, a whole bunch of flying geese blocks today. Now, this is a fun stitch along that I have been sharing all year, and not only are we sharing these fun piecing blocks every month, but also I am sharing with you how to machine quilt these blocks every month as well. So if you have not yet checked out our online Facebook group called Let's Stitch a Year of Stars, we'd love to have you join that group. That's where we share photos, and it's really a great community where really quilters encouraging quilters with and sharing what they're sewing and quilting. We've had a lot of fun. Plus we have awesome giveaways in that group. So make sure you check it out. But today, let's get sewing this fun Spider Star block. I am going to start out. I have already cut all of my fabrics. Before you start sewing, you definitely want to cut your fabrics and do any marking. You'll want to pick up the complete pattern for this block over on our website, pieceandquilt.com. Now, to start out, I've got my 2 7/8 inch triangles all cut and ready to sew together. I love chain piecing, so I am actually going to chain piece these triangle units together. I'll place those 2 triangles right sides together, sew along the shorter edge. You don't want to sew along that long edge. For these blocks, you do want to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I am doing all my piecing here on this adorable little featherweight machine. If you do have questions about my machine, I have all the details about it in the description below. I like to place a little bit of painter's tape on my machine just to help guide, to give me a great 1/4 inch seam allowance. I actually quite often use maybe a scant 1/4 inch. That's just the type of quilting or sewing that I like to do. So I place these triangles together, right sides together, stitch along those lines. Now I'm going to chain piece, clip my threads, and now I'm going to press towards the dark. I love the look of pressing towards the dark, so it's pretty much what I'm going to do most of the time. I also like to use a little bit of flatter when I press my blocks to help them stay flat. Well, once I put them together, I'll realize that I sewed one of them wrong and I need to unpick. So always lay your blocks out before you sew them together so you don't do what I just did. Sometimes it's a little bit of a puzzle to put your blocks together. So now I'm going to piece these 2 together the correct way. Now we'll press towards the dark. All right, now that those prints or colors don't match right next to each other, they're opposites, we're going to line those 2 up together. And now we've pressed towards the dark, so our seams will nest together almost perfectly. I'm not perfect, so I don't ever expect my quilts to be either. So I'll nest those center seams together. Personally, I'm a pretty easygoing, whatever you want to call it, piecer, so I don't pin, but if you want to pin, this would be a place where you'd want to pin those triangles together. Then we'll sew them together along the long edge. And press that. Now this is my center block. Because of that, there's a pretty good chance I'm probably going to stitch in the ditch, so I definitely want to make sure that I'm pressing my seams towards one side or the other. So now I have one hourglass block. I'm going to set that aside for just a little while. While you're cutting, you are going to cut your background fabric into, let's see, 2" by 3.5" strips. We've cut several of these from your background print. My background is actually this green color, so it's going to be a little bit different from the original version with the pink background. I thought it would be fun to make this version slightly different. So we're going to make several flying geese units. I have laid my units all together with the colors that are going to be sewn onto the top of those. Because we're going to make so many of these flying geese units, I just want to make sure that I don't mix anything up and sew the wrong colors. But with all of my small, like I said, the 2" by 3.5" strips, and then they're matching 2" squares that I have gone through and marked, we'll start out by placing one of those 2" squares on the corner, and then we'll sew along that marked line. I'll repeat this process sewing onto one side of all of these 2" by 3.5" units. So these units that I'm piecing right now would be my light pink and warm pink units. I'm going to have 4 of those. So there's those first 4. I will come back after I sew all of them on one side. I'm going to clip and press, and then I'll come back and do the opposite side. So next I'm going to use, this is my background color, the green. So this would be your light pink and my blue. I'll repeat that process, sewing one of those squares onto 4 of those. Now the measurements that are included in the workbook will get you a 12" finished block. And next we're going to move on. So this is my warm pink, and then I'm going to use, again, this is what my background would be, which is the green. We'll sew those 4 of those units just the same. And then we'll do 4 more using our background color and the blue blocks. All right, so now that I have all of those sewn onto one side, all of the 2-inch squares sewn onto one side, I am going to clip those apart and then trim 1/4 inch on the outside of these units. From there, I'll press towards the dark. So let's press those towards the dark. Now with my fabrics, because the color choices that I've used here, they're actually pretty similar, even though my background is maybe a little bit lighter. It's so similar that I am actually going to just press all of these out. Once you have all of those pressed, then we're going to sew the remaining 2-inch squares that we've marked onto the opposite sides of those flying geese units. And I am definitely going to chain piece here. I should have probably stacked these up in color order, but I didn't, so I'm just going to sew them on in random order. I like to use the blue Mark Big On marker to do my markings here. And the thread that I'm using to piece is So Fine by Superior Threads. That's actually what I'm using in the top and in my bobbin. We have all of these products plus a lot more notions over on our website, pieceandquilt.com. Once I have all of those half square or flying geese units, I should say, sewn, then again, we're going to trim 1/4 of an inch on the outside of that seam, and then we'll press towards the dark, or like I'm doing here, we'll press out. All right, once you have all of those trimmed, then you'll hop over and press them. Now that we have all of our flying geese units made, we're going to start sewing them together. So we're going to start out referring to the illustrations in our workbook, sewing these geese together. So along the first row, I'm actually going to line everything up so that I know what I need to be sewing together. We'll start out with one of these blue triangles. Then from there, we're going to add a flying geese unit. And then a second flying geese unit. A third flying geese unit. And a fourth flying geese unit. So that will be one side. We'll make 2 of those units exactly the same. We'll do just a little bit of chain piecing here, just so that I don't confuse myself too much. So if you are chain piecing like I am, you will want to have 4 units that look like that. Then we'll press those units. I am going to press going towards the background unit. So because for me, I'm using the green as my background, I'll press towards the green. Once you have those 4 units, then you're going to sew 2 of the units together, continuing with our chain piecing. You'll sew 2 of them together like that. So now we should have a row that looks a little bit like this, probably have a pink background going on there. Now we're going to sew the triangles to the ends of those units. Now when I'm laying my triangle on here to sew it onto the end, you want it to make sure that it's centered. You really can kind of line it up here with the triangle that's already in the flying geese unit. Then we'll attach both of those ends. Now let's press again. Now you should have this long center unit. Set that aside. Let's finish the other sides. Now, like we did before, we are going to sew those flying geese units together. I want to start with one with the pink on the top and one with the yellow or your background on the bottom. So we're going to make 4 units that look like that. All right, just like we did on the other flying goose units, we're going to press up. All right, now we're going to sew those flying geese units together into 2 units. And again, let's press those. All right, so at this point you could actually do one of 2 things. You could go ahead and sew your large triangle background triangles on, or you can sew those smaller end triangles on. Personally, I'm going to sew those smaller ones on first. But it really doesn't matter which order you do it in. Make sure that that triangle is centered. And if you need to, you can always mark your center. Then back to chain piecing. Okay, so now once we have that unit done, we're going to add those large triangles to the side. So I lay my triangles next to it, make sure they'll fit. When I stitch these, you could go through and pin if you wanted. However, I'm probably not ever going to pin. I'll just lay my triangle right on there and start stitching at the top straight side. And of course, I'm going to chain piece this. And then we'll also add one of those triangles to the opposite side of that unit. Because I like to sew from that straight edge down, this time I'm going to actually turn my fabric the other way and sew on that side. And now we're going to press, I'm going to press towards the background on this. The block will lay a little bit flatter if you do press towards the background where there's a bit less bulk. Oh, that's looking so awesome. So now we're going to sew that final side onto the block. I love how this block is turning out. Oh, it's so cute. Okay, let's press it one more time, then I'll show you the final block. And there you have it, the Spider Star quilt block. This quilt block finishes at 12 inches. I love how it turned out. That green was so much fun to sew with. Make sure you do share your progress in our Facebook group, Let's Stitch a Year of Stars. And if you want to see how I machine quilt these blocks, make sure you do check out my machine quilting videos. Have a great day, everybody.